All right. So the match good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's your boy once again, Pubesi Mpati Umhlaba. Welcome to another episode of Football is a Religion. Right. So we all anticipating the quarterfinal clashes, mouth-watering clashes of the African Cup of Nations, right? Which are being held in Côte d'Ivoire. So one such game that we are all looking forward to, that we all have on our radar, is the game between Nigeria, the Super Eagles, against Angola, right? So I would just like to actually inform you guys about what's actually interesting ahead of this encounter, this crunch encounter between Nigeria as well as Angola. Because Angola are also one of the surprise packages of this year's tournament, with an impressive record of never losing so yet this tournament, and actually topping their group ahead of Algeria, Burkina Faso, as well as Mauritania, right? So Angola came into this game after an impressive 3-0 victory over Namibia. Namibia, remember, they were making their first appearances in the knockout stages of the African Cup of Nations, right? But there are certain interesting stats that I actually like to mention to you all ahead of this crunch encounter between Nigeria and Angola. Number one, as we get started, right? Remember, Nigeria has an impressive record against Angola, ahead of their quarterfinal clash, of the African Cup of Nations, quarterfinals in Abidjan on Friday. So remember the Palancas Negras, who have been one of the surprise teams of the competition so far. They will be actually seeking to stop the Super Eagles in their match that will be played in the Ivorian capital, And another thing that is worth noting is the fact that this will be the first ever encounter between Nigeria and Angola at the African Cup of Nations, right? Their last meeting in any competition dates back way to January 2018, which is just like now over 5 years ago, at the CAF African Nations Championship, which led to the Super Eagles winning that encounter by 2-1 after extra time in the quarterfinal. So that's another thing that you can tell, that these teams, they always find themselves, taking on each other in the quarterfinal stages, whether it's in the CAF African Nations Championship or whether it's in the African Cup of Nations Cup, right? African Cup of Nations, I meant to say. So remember, Angola's last victory against Nigeria was a World Cup qualifier in June 2004, which ended in a 1-0 victory to the Angolans, thanks to a winning goal by Angola's all-time top goal scorer, Agua, right? Legend he was. He was legendary during his time. And Nigeria are now actually playing in their 11th quarterfinal match at the African Cup of Nations. So no team has ever played in more games at this stage of the competition, despite the fact that Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, and Tunisia have also played 11 quarterfinal clashes. So that's a new record for the Super Eagles of Nigeria, and they just joined the elite, right? So all of these teams that I've spoken about, that I've just mentioned, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, and Tunisia, have also reached the quarterfinal stage of the African Cup of Nations 11 times. Remember, Côte d'Ivoire, they will be partaking against Mali, the hosts, you understand? And Nigeria now have won their last 3 AFCON games without conceding. Wow, that's impressive. It shows that Nigeria have kept, an impressive defensive record. They've only conceded once in this year's tournament, which was they conceded against Equatorial Guinea in that surprise, 1-1 draw. But Nigeria have been far compact at the back. They've been solid, they've been resilient, and it's very difficult for any opposition to actually break down their defense. And which is one thing that is so impressive by the Super Eagles of Nigeria. Even though they didn't have a convincing group stage performance, like their performances in the group stages were not really that interesting, but to actually say the least, Nigeria do boast an impressive defensive record, only conceding once. You understand? And as for Angola, Angola won their last 3 matches at the African Cup of Nations, so which is like a 4th victory, at AFCON 2023 against the Super Eagles of Nigeria, which is highly unlikely, would actually see them equal their total number of wins across all 8 of their previous tournament appearances combined. So they've played 26 games, you understand? They've won 4 games and they've drawn 12, losing only just 10, you understand? in 26 games. And Angola, another thing Angola have also done, which is impressive, is that they've won their last 2 AFCON matches without conceding as well. So, which also means that both of these teams come into this clash with, a great defensive unit. Although the defense of the Super Eagles is way much better than Angola, but Angola also, boast an impressive defensive record, because remember now, they've kept 2 clean sheets in their previous 2 games. And remember, they've never previously Angola have never kept 3 consecutive clean sheets in the African Cup of Nations. Perhaps that might change. The only way in which that might change is that they should win against the Super Eagles of Nigeria, but it's highly unlikely, like I said, because I am fancying Nigeria to actually win this one. Or if ever, they must just make sure that they don't concede throughout the entire game, throughout the entire 90 minutes or even the 120 minutes, and just go to a penalty shootout in order for them to break that record. Because I see Nigeria actually winning this game, in regulation time. That I can tell you, right? And as for Nigeria, Nigeria are now the team with the second highest expected goals, You're right. Yeah, they are the second highest expected goals total at the 2023 Total African Energies Cup of Nations, right? Remember now, they haven't even conceded a lot of goals as well, Nigeria. So that just tells you that, this Super Eagles team is a force to be reckoned with, and they are amongst the favorites to actually go all the way and actually clinch the title in Ivory Coast, right? And another thing that we can actually look at is the fact that, you look at a player like Gelson Dalla. I think if you are Orlando Pirates, you have just lost your star player, Thembinkosi Lodge. This is another player they should be looking at to actually replace Thembinkosi Lodge at the Sea Robbers. Because following his brace, against Namibia last time out, right? Gelson Dalla is now the joint top goal scorer with 4 goals for Angola in a single edition of the tournament, alongside the legendary Manucho. Remember, the legendary Manucho scored 4 goals in the 2008 African Cup of Nations. And on the side of the Super Eagles of Nigeria, Ademola Lookman, has now scored his first ever, African Cup of Nations goals against Cameroon in the last 16, and he could actually become the 4th Nigerian to score 3 or more goals in the knockout rounds of a single AFCON edition, after obviously Odion Igalo in 2019, who netted 4 times in the knockout stages, as well as the legendary JJ Okocha, who netted 3 times in the 2004 African Cup of Nations, and last but not least, Rashidi Yekini, who netted 3 times in the 1994 African Cup of Nations knockout stages. And if Gelson Dalla scores a 5th goal at the AFCON tournament, joining top goal scorer so far of Equatorial Guinea, Emilio Insue, 2 players will have scored 5 or more goals in consecutive AFCON tournaments after Toko Ekambi, as well as Vincent Abubakar for Cameroon at the AFCON 2021, right? And more than the number of players that scored as many as 5 goals in the previous 10 editions between 2002 as well as 2019. Samuel Eto'o did so in 2006, he did so in 2008, and remember also Gedo did so in 2010, as well as Odion Igalo did so in 2019. So all of these guys that I've just mentioned have scored 5 goals or more in an AFCON tournament, right? So records are always there to be broken. Records are always there to be broken, to say the least, Yeah, but that's it for now, man. We'll be in touch pretty soon after the quarterfinal clashes have been held. Another quarterfinal clash to actually look forward to at this year's African Cup of Nations will be the clash between the Democratic Republic of Congo as well as Guinea, which will obviously take place on Friday, with the game obviously expected to be very, very, very explosive, right? So, when you look at this one, right, Congo are actually now facing Guinea for the 4th time at the African Cup of Nations, right? With the 3 previous encounters all coming in the group stages, 1 win each, and as well as a draw so both teams have won a game against each other and they've drawn the last encounter, right? So in the last meeting between which took place between these two sides, right, came in 2004. It was the group stages. And obviously, the Silly National came from behind to actually win 2-1, thanks to goals from Titi Camara as well as Pascal Fenduno, right? And the Democratic Republic of the Congo will play in their first quarterfinal at the African Cup of Nations since 2017. Remember, they lost by 2-1 to Ghana, while they actually reached the semifinals, the first semifinals, right, in 2015, where they actually won 4-2 over Congo in the quarterfinals, and then they went on to lose 3-1 to Côte d'Ivoire in the semifinals. So it's pretty much interesting, to actually say the least, when you look at Congo's history in this tournament. And remember, three of the Democratic Republic of Congo's last 4 knockout games at the CAF African Cup of Nations, have all been decided by penalties, So remember, the Leopards, they won 2 against Egypt in the last round, as well as against Equatorial Guinea in a third place match in 2015, as well as now they've only lost once. They've only lost 1 penalty shootout against Madagascar in the last 16 in 2019. So yeah, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, right? They do have a pretty decent knockout record, right? Based on the fact of penalty shootouts. They've been very clinical from 12 yards out whenever the game had to be settled via penalty shootout. And as well as for Guinea, Guinea have won 2 of their 4 matches at this year's AFCON tournament, right? They've only lost once, and they've also drawn once, right? So that's basically as many victories as in their previous 13 games in the competition. Remember, in their previous 13 games in the competition, they won 2, they've drawn 6, and they've lost 5. So basically, it's not a good record, to say the least, but they're far. They've come this far in the tournament. They've made it to the quarterfinal stages of this year's tournament as another surprise package. But like I said, all the teams that have partaken at this year's tournament, at this year's continental showpiece, deserve to be there. They deserve to be there because they've shown that they've got the quality. They've shown that they can compete at the highest level. Because think about it. This year's AFCON, the standard has been very high. The bar has been set very high. So you look at also Guinea, right? Again, Guinea now, they could actually win 3 matches at a single AFCON tournament for the 3rd time, right? The last time they did so was when they won all 3 of their group stage games, across, like, last time that happened was when they won all 3 of their group stage games in the 2006 showpiece, as well as they've also achieved 3 wins in the 1976 showpiece. As for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, remember, the Democratic Republic of the Congo have drawn their last 5 AFCON games, their second longest such run in the competition, after drawing their 6 group stage matches across 2013 as well as the 2015 editions, right? And once again, the Democratic Republic of Congo have faced just 28 shots at this year's continental showpiece, right? So basically, that's the joint fewest in the tournament alongside Morocco, right? And Guinea, however, have faced the fewest shots on target with 4. You understand? They've only faced 4 shots on target, Guinea. So perhaps, again, we can say the defense has been pretty solid, perhaps to an extent. Not really as solid as the defense of Nigeria, but yeah, to an extent. Just to a slight extent. And Mohamed Bayo, he has netted 2 of Guinea's 3 goals at this year's continental showpiece, and he could actually become the first Guinea player. He could go on to make history by becoming the first Guinea player to actually score 3 goals at a single edition, since Pascal Fenduno scored 4 in 2006. As for Meshak Elia, he has been directly involved in 3 of the Democratic Republic of Congo's last 4 goals at the African Cup of Nations, right? So he has got 1 goal, he's got 2 assists, and he's the only Leopards player to score both, and to actually secure an assist in a single edition across their last 2 tournaments, which was also in 2019 as well as in 2023, right? And that's pretty much impressive stats for the individual, because you look at also Arthur Masuaku, former West Ham United left back Arthur Masuaku, who has actually played 45 passes into the opponent's box at this year's continental showpiece. That is at least 20 more than any other Democratic Republic of the Congo player has made in a single edition on record since 2019. So pretty much interesting stats, perhaps based on an individual perspective. Yeah, there is a lot to actually look forward to in this particular encounter. A lot. Ooh, okay. In the third quarterfinal, right? In the third match day of the quarterfinal clash, of this year's African Cup of Nations, sees the hosts lock horns against their neighbors, Mali. Yeah, Mali, right? So remember, coming into this tournament, Mali were also one of the informed teams, right? And remember, what goes with so much surprise is the fact that Mali have never ever won the African Cup of Nations, but they've done so well, right? They are the team to actually watch out for. But now, remember with Côte d'Ivoire, they were just lucky to actually make it to the stage of the tournament. But I guess home ground advantage, they will not let this slip ever again. I can tell you that for a fact. So remember now, with Côte d'Ivoire, despite the fact that they've entered the knockout stages as the third placed, right, team, they've shown resilience, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we should do. I think it's just basically the fact that they've changed coaches, right? They did well to change coaches, because right now the change in the technical side, the change on the touchline has actually brought a lot of, what can I say? Has actually brought a lot of changes. We are starting to see a new Côte d'Ivoire, a new look side, not a new look side, but a new style of play, because now we're seeing them in the last game against Senegal. Côte d'Ivoire, remember, they were dominant. They were able to move the pass. They were able to spread passes. They were able to close those spaces, which we saw, were prevalent in their group stages, games, right? Because they were far from convincing in the group stages. Even that 2-0 victory against Guinea, you could see, Côte d'Ivoire was no way interesting here. They were not convincing at all. And eventually they were exposed against Nigeria, as well as surprise packages Equatorial Guinea, and that 4-0 thumping, right? And now that means that the Elephants, they face a big test for their character when they take on a talented Mali side, like I said, who are keen on making history with their free-flowing style of play. And they do play good football, the Malians, right? So that's why I say Côte d'Ivoire need to be heavily prepared. And as well as, they must not underestimate their opponents. Although I do see Côte d'Ivoire just winning this one, because home ground advantage will count for them and they will make it count. I don't think they will make the slip after they've been given a second chance, at life. I don't think Côte d'Ivoire will want to make the slip. I don't think they would want to even, disappoint their fans. I don't think so. So this is basically now the sixth, African Cup of Nations encounter between Mali as well as the Ivorians, And remember, it's the first meeting since the last 16 encounter in 2019, which resulted in a 1-0 victory for the Ivorians. And remember, the Elephants have never lost an African Cup of Nations match against the Eagles of Mali. So they've won their 4 out of their previous 5 games, only just drawing once. And while against no other team have they ever played more often in the competition without losing. Remember, they also boast another great unbeaten run against Togo in 5 games, right? So Mali have only just scored 2 goals in their previous 5 African Cup of Nations games against Côte d'Ivoire, and they've conceded 9 times, right? So against no team have they played more than twice in the competition and have scored fewer goals. You understand? And remember, Mali progressed from all 5 of their quarterfinal appearances at the African Cup of Nations. So which actually means that Mali have never lost a game in the quarterfinal stages. Whenever they've made it to the quarterfinal stages of the African Cup of Nations, they've gone all the way. You understand? They've managed to exceed and go all the way to the semifinals or perhaps even the final. But they've never won the African Cup of Nations, right? And indeed, it is actually the most number of matches any team has played in this round of the competition without ever being eliminated. Perhaps this will be the first against the hosts. Surprising, just sarcastically saying. And another thing is that Côte d'Ivoire are through to the quarterfinals, of the AFCON 2023. Despite losing 2 of their last 3 matches prior to that 1-0 defeat to Nigeria in their second group game in this tournament, right? As well as they've only lost 2 of their previous 19 games in the African Cup of Nations, right? Another thing as for Côte d'Ivoire is that another impressive record that they do boast is the fact that, perhaps it's less impressive, but they've only scored 3 goals in getting to the quarterfinals of this year's AFCON 2023, right? So basically, that's the fewest they've ever scored in a single edition when playing a minimum of 4 games. So that's not an impressive record. But I guess it contributes to the fact that they lacked firepower up front, and the absence of Sebastian Haller, is also another factor which also did cause this particular dilemma. Because now if Ivory Coast were to actually progress against Mali, the hosts, will have reached at least the semifinals of this competition in their consecutive AFCON tournaments, right? After Cameroon finished third in 2021 for the first time since a run of 7 tournaments in a row between 1996 as well as 2008. And Mali are unbeaten in their last 8 AFCON matches since the start of the 2021 edition, because they've won 4 games and they've also drawn 4 games, conceding just 3 goals, right? And keeping 5 clean sheets. And as for Côte d'Ivoire have recorded 49 sequences of 10 plus passes in open play at this year's African Cup of Nations, which is very poor, to say the least. Very poor, yeah? But it actually sums up the reason why they were so poor in the group stages. You understand? And remember now, over the last 5 editions, only Cameroon, who did this in 2021, have actually made more passes per match in a single tournament, right? So Côte d'Ivoire have scored just from, 5% of their shots at the AFCON 2023, because imagine Côte d'Ivoire coming into this clash against Mali. Côte d'Ivoire have had 54 shots at goal. They've had 54 shots at goal. They've only converted 3. Out of those 54 shots at goal, only 3 have been able to find the back of the net. And it's only the Democratic of the Republic of Congo that have a worse record than Côte d'Ivoire. Because also the Democratic Republic of Congo, have only converted 3 times from 56 shots at goal. Poof. So it shows how bad the conversion rate is between Côte d'Ivoire as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo. Even if they are quarterfinalists, because while it's the worst ratio, the worst conversion rate in a single AFCON edition for Côte d'Ivoire on record since 2010. So that just shows that, they lack a lot of firepower up there. But the return of Sebastian Haller does, actually boost, their attack in a major way. You understand? And Lassine Sinayoko for Mali, he has scored 3 of Mali's 5 goals at this year's AFCON, right? And he could actually become the first Malian to score 4 goals in a single edition since Freddy Kunati did so in 2004 by netting 4 times. You understand? Yeah, it's going to be a great encounter between Mali and Côte d'Ivoire. Certainly looking forward to that one. Okay. Another thing, last but not least, Cabo Verde. I don't know. They sometimes some people refer to it as Cabo Verde, Cape Verde. Most people know it as Cape Verde, but it's also referred to as Cabo Verde, right? So that's the last quarterfinal clash between Cape Verde as well as South Africa, right? The 1996 champions. So like I said, the game between Cape Verde and South Africa is also another interesting clash to actually look forward to, in this year's African Cup of Nations quarterfinal clashes, right? It is the last of the 4 quarterfinal clashes that will be taking place over the course of the weekend. But what I can just say to y'all is that South Africa must just not underestimate Cape Verde, right? Because Cape Verde have done so well. Because the 2 sides will be meeting in another mouth-watering quarterfinal clash, in the African Cup of Nations on Saturday night, right? So the 2 sides, remember, they've been surprise packages, with their impressive performance, to actually reach the last 8 of the tournament, and will actually seek to go a step further, because think about it. Cape Verde or Cabo Verde as well as South Africa, they are meeting for the second time at the African Cup of Nations after a 0-0 draw in the group stages matches. Remember, the group stage game in 2013 was the opening encounter of that 2013 African Cup of Nations, which was hosted here in South Africa at the FNB Stadium. And the previous encounter was Cape Verde's very first match in the competition and the very first game of the 2013 edition hosted by South Africa. another thing is that South Africa, remember, have reached the quarterfinals in 3 of their last 4 appearances at the African Cup of Nations, while they will be looking to actually reach the semifinals for the first time of the competition, for the first time since 2000, when they lost 2-0 to Nigeria, right? And Cape Verde, have been a surprise package, because remember, they've won 3 of their last 4 matches at this year's African Cup of Nations. They've only drawn 1. They've scored 8 goals. They've had more victories. They've had more goals than, in their previous 11 games in the competition combined. Because they've won in the 11 games in the competition, they've won only twice, they've drawn 6, and they've lost 3 times. So that shows that, Cape Verde have actually improved. This is actually a team that is really growing in terms of their footballing caliber, right? And as you can tell, that Cape Verde currently, they are looking forward to the fact that, they are looking to reach the semifinals of the African Cup of Nations for the first time in their history. With this, only being their second quarterfinal appearance. Remember, they did also appear in the quarterfinals in South Africa 2013. They only lost in that quarterfinal game 2-0 to Ghana, the team that they just knocked out of this year's tournament. Imagine what's so ironic is the fact that Cape Verde finished top of the group ahead of Egypt and Ghana. So when you talk about Egypt and Ghana, we're talking about sides that are 2 nations that have got a combined 11 African Cup of Nations titles between them. You understand? Because Egypt are the record champions of the African Cup of Nations. They've won it 7 times, and Ghana have won it 4 times. And as for Bafana South Africa have managed to at least keep 3 consecutive clean sheets at this year's African Cup of Nations for the first time since February 1998. Ronwen Williams, Mutobi Mvala, the entire Sundowns defense, Mutobi Mvala, Grant Kekana in that central defensive partnership. On the left-hand side, you have Obri Mudiba. On the right-hand side, you have Khuliso Mudau. So basically, it's like Sundowns. The entire defense is Sundowns, including the goalkeeper. And again, right, Bafana, they've never stopped their opponents from scoring in 4 African Cup of matches in a row, remember. And South Africa have made just like 2 changes to their starting 11 at this year's AFCON tournament. That's basically the joint fewest of any side, while Cabo Verde have made 14. So it's only Guinea that have made more changes in the competition to their starting lineups this year. And what's also interesting is that the age, when you look at Cape Verde, it's like only 29 years, 64 days. That's basically they have the oldest average starting 11 at this year's AFCON 2023, because indeed 5 of their 8 goals have been scored by players who are aged 30 or over, right? And the last team that have had more goals in a single competition from players aged 30 and above was Egypt in the 1998 African Cup of Nations. And as well as now, Cape Verde, they have attempted the most dribbles, in this year's African Cup of Nations. 94. They've attempted 95 dribbles, and only 44 of those dribbles have been successful. And indeed, the Blue Sharks have attempted like 34 dribbles in the round of 16 against Mauritania, and only 13 of those dribbles have been successful. Basically, that's the highest total in an AFCON match this year. Tembazwane Mshishi, he has been very lively for Bafana at this year's AFCON tournament, as he has been directly involved in 50%, of South Africa's goals at AFCON 2023, meaning he has got 2 goals. He's also got 1 assist, while he could actually be the first Bafana player to score 3 goals in a single edition of the AFCON since Sean Bartlett, the legendary Sean Bartlett, did so in 2000, by actually netting 5 times. Captain Ryan Mendes on Cabo Verde's side, he has been directly involved in more goals. 4 goals, you understand? So he has been involved in 2 goals. He's got 2 goals, he's got 2 assists, right? Than any other Cape Verde player at the African Cup of Nations. While his 3 goal involvements, which include the 2 goals as well as the assist at AFCON 2023, is also the most by any Cape Verde player in a single edition. Wow. I'm definitely looking forward to that game. I hope you are at home, because that's going to be another interesting clash to actually look forward to.